We're in the Grande Complication workshop of Audemars Piguet in Le Brassus. It is here that the Grande Complications are assembled. There's one watch being worked on by all of the watchmakers today, and that is the Royal Oak Offshore Grande Complication that debuted in Geneva this year. Each of these watchmakers builds the watch beginning to end. Each one is actually today working on a different phase of construction, so we'll get to see different elements and how they come together. And at the end, we'll get to see the attachment of a dial, hands, and the casing up, the final stage of construction for this Grande Complication. Our guide will be Mark Schmidt. Mark, I'd like you to lead us through the process of the building of the Royal Oak Offshore Grande Complication, starting with the way the parts arrive into this Grande Complication room.
Okay, Jeff. What we see here is the watch in its first stage. We have the main plate over here and all the bridges. They go over to the watchmaker, and the watchmaker is going to do the countersinks and set the stones in place. Then all the parts go back to the skeletonized workshop. Then the watch comes back to the watchmaker, and that's what we see here. This one has been roughly skeletonized, and the bridges here are ready to receive the components for the movement.
So let's go over to the workbench of one of the watchmakers, I think, who's starting at this initial stage where he's ready to start mounting all the other components to the watch. So if I understand it correctly, now we're looking at one of the first phases of the real construction.
The bridges, in order to hold in place, you need screws. That means you need feet under the bridge. The screws, certain screws need posts to be held in place at the right section of the movement, and that's what he's putting on right now on the movement. What we see now is roughing up of the foot, bringing it to the right diameter.
And these are different abrasive materials that he's
These are different
using?
grades of abrasive papers, and that enables him to get the right amount of material off and the right finishing when you look at it through the watchmaker's loop.
So, Mark, we've come now to another one of the watchmakers working at a different stage
Yes.
of assembly. And what is he working on at this point?
At this point, Yves is finishing all the steel parts needed for all the complications for the piece. The part he's working on is a lever, which is going to interact with the hammer of the chronograph. And what you see now is he's getting the angle or the bevel around the piece in place.
So he's doing the anglage.
He's doing the
with a
anglage.
hand file.
Exactly.
We moved on to another workbench and a different operation in front of us, which is what?
Sebastian is taking care of the Perpetual Calendar,
which is on its own plate in the movement.
It's on its own plate, because in the logic of the advancement of the work, everything is complete by now in his piece, taken care of by different people for decoration and for plating. And while this is taking place, he gets the calendar in shape. And what you see now is the mise en fonction, like they call it in French. It's to get them work together. And what he has just put in place on the plate is the main part of the Perpetual Calendar. We call it the bascule déclencheuse du quantième, and it's that part which reads the information from the Perpetual Calendar and passes it on to the hands so that the indications the owner sees are accurate after the midnight jump.
We're lucky, Mark, we have actually one of the watches ready for its final stages, dial and hands.
Exactly. And Stefan is now putting the dial in place. It's a sapphire crystal dial, which doesn't make things easier for him, because sapphire means it can break, and sapphire means also transparent, which means you see everything. This piece has altogether 11 hands. It looks easy, but putting hands in place is one of the most delicate parts of the assembling of a watch. And a lot of watchmakers love that section because it's when you really get the salary of your work. You see if what you have done before performs correctly. He just has put in place the minute hand, so that's the last of the 11 hands fitted into that watch, and he's going to check that it chimes like it should.